the media for coming through to the National Results Operations Center. Sitting and joining me with this afternoon on the press briefing, sitting next to me is Dr. Nomsa Masuku, the Commissioner of the IEC. Sitting next to her is the Vice Chairperson, Commissioner Love. Sitting next to her is Chairperson of the IEC, Mr. Glenn Mashinini, and right next to the Chairperson is the Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Sai Mamabolo. Without much ado, on the second day of special voting, I'm going to request the Chief Electoral Officer just to brief us about preparations for tomorrow, as well as some of the issues that ensued during the 2 days of special voting. Mr. Mamabolo.
Thank you very much, Kate. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow South Africans, our 22,924 voting stations are all poised and ready to open at 7 a.m. tomorrow to welcome South Africa's 26.7 million voters to have their say in the national and provincial elections. Some 200,000 election officials are in place and ready to conduct voting between 7 and 9 tomorrow, when voting stations are scheduled to close. However, voting will continue after 9 p.m. at stations where voters may still be waiting in the queues at 9. Voters are reminded of the following key information regarding the process tomorrow. Firstly, everybody must be a registered voter in order to vote. And since you registered on the roll, you will remain on the roll. There is no possibility that you may be removed from the roll if you did not re-register before these elections. So the 26.7 million consist of persons who have been on the roll since the voters' roll was first established in 1999. So voters can SMS their ID numbers to the number 32810 or call 0800 11 8000 to check on their registration and their voting station details. The contact center will be open from 7 until 9 to assist voters with any queries that they may have. For your interest, the contact center took over 4,500 calls yesterday. We also have a mobile app which is downloadable from the App Store, as well as a website which can be used for confirming the registration as well as the voting station where persons are registered. Secondly, voters must take a valid ID document, which is either a green barcoded ID book, a smart card ID, or a valid temporary identification certificate. Branches of the Department of Home Affairs will be open tomorrow between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. to assist voters to obtain temporary identification certificates as well as collect their smart ID cards. Voters whose addresses are not reflected on the voters' roll will be required to provide their addresses prior to voting. Nonetheless, proof of address is not a requirement for purposes of voting. If voters are voting in a voting district in their province, they will be handed 2 ballot papers, one for the national election and one for the provincial election. Voters should ensure that these ballot papers are stamped at the back by the election official. Voters will then cast their ballots and place their marked ballot papers into a ballot box. Voters are reminded that the secrecy of the vote is protected by law, and it is an offense to take a photograph of a marked ballot. The past 2 days of special votes has helped to iron out early teething problems and ensure that everything is in place and ready for tomorrow's election day. However, as you can imagine, with an operation of this magnitude, there were some challenges encountered yesterday and in the early part of this morning. The Electoral Commission is encouraged to note that a significant decline in community protests this week. In those instances where protest action did continue, the South African police services were quick to intervene to restore calm. A minimum number of 2 police officers will be deployed to each voting station, and the SAPS will remain on high alert in high-risk areas to ensure no disruptions to the elections. Citizens are reminded that any disruption to elections constitute a criminal offense. And our view is that enough protests have been had, people's issues have been heard. Now is the opportunity for the voter to express themselves. So tomorrow is about the voters. Tomorrow is about people who are going to be making their political choices. And the necessary space for that must be created by everyone, including community leaders who are leading community protests. In one apparent crime-related incident yesterday, a group of knife-wielding men confronted a group of election officials conducting home visits in Guyana and confiscated 93 unused provincial ballot papers, which they then destroyed. Fortunately, no one was injured, and the cast ballots, 7 of them, were secured and not affected. The SAPS were quick to respond, and 2 suspects have been arrested and are now in police custody. 2 vehicle accidents involving staff were reported over the past 2 days, but fortunately only minor injuries were sustained. The Electoral Commission is investigating reports of instances of the double envelope system not being used in certain parts of the country yesterday, as well as some ballots, sporadic incidents of some ballots that were not stamped at the back. The stamping of ballot papers immediately prior to them being issued to voters is an important security measure. These incidents were discussed in the National Party Liaison Committee this morning, which has made some recommendations to the Commission, including that the Commission accept the legitimacy of these ballots if verified. The Commission will ultimately make a decision on whether these ballots are included in the count or not. Additional reminders of the importance of stamping ballot papers and of the double envelope system were sent to presiding officers and deputy presiding officers today. The Electoral Commission has removed a deputy presiding officer from a voting station in Binoni, Ekurhuleni, following an investigation into a video showing a party agent assisting with the transfer of special votes from the special votes bag into a ballot box at the voting station. Party agents are not permitted to handle any election material and may also observe and raise objections if circumstances necessitating that arise. A pack of 3 unused and unassembled ballot boxes was found on the side of the road in Zaneni, Limpopo. Investigations show that it was lost in transport by an area manager. This person has been suspended from office and will be discharged from duty for gross negligence. The ballot boxes were recovered by the South African Police Service and returned to the Electoral Commission. The Commission appreciates the vigilance of party agents and voters in monitoring the election process and in bringing to its attention potential problems. This should be done firstly at the voting station through presiding officers and if not resolved, then it should be raised through existing channels, including the party license structures. Providing as much detail of any incident, including where and when it occurred, will significantly speed up the investigation process. Some rain was reported yesterday and today in KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape. Fortunately, this is not as severe as to disrupt the voting process. The Commission is pleased to know that the South African Weather Service is predicting relatively mild and fair weather conditions across the country tomorrow, with no severe weather warnings. Some windy conditions are reported for the southwest parts of the country, but we don't have a lot of tent voting stations in that area and hope that the wind will not be strong enough to impact our operations. With regard to the update on special voting, we do not as yet have final figures for special votes cast over the past 2 days, but indications are that this has proceeded well throughout the country. We did arrange for additional resources for home visits in the Eastern Cape, which has the highest number of home visits, as well as Northwest, which had reported to be slightly behind schedule last night. We are, however, confident that all special votes will be completed today. We have also received special votes from 113 of the 121 foreign missions which were cast by voters outside of the Republic on the 27th of April. The 8 outstanding batches of special votes are from the following countries: Algiers in Algeria, Brussels, Belgium, Shanghai, China, Lubumbashi, DRC, Asmara in Eritrea, Tokyo, Japan, Sao Tome and Principe, Caracas, Venezuela. All these are now en route and we hope to receive them imminently. The special votes cast overseas will be counted at the National Office of the IEC on Thursday morning in front of party agents. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the Electoral Commission calls on every South African citizen to celebrate our 25th anniversary of democracy by ensuring tomorrow's election take place in the spirit of 1994. Let voting continue peacefully, calmly, and without disruption. And let us once again show the world that South Africa remains a shining light of democracy in action. The campaigning has now been done. It is now the turn of voters to have their say. Let's vote, excel, and may God bless our democracy, our country, and these elections. Our clarion call once again, excel all voters to the ballot box.
Yeah. Thank you. Yep. Thank you very much, SCO. Excel indeed. I'm going to open the floor for questions. You tell us your name and then raise the question. Let me take the first group of questions. I've got my colleagues on the floor. They've got microphones. I saw a hand in front. Can I get their hands so that we take them as a badge? I've got 3 from this side. Can I have my colleagues, please, with microphones? Yeah.
Lula Mamakya, SABC. If you can comment on allegations that some voting stations don't have, not voting stations, but on the special vote, blind people do not have, there are no ballot papers that are in Braille. And how then are the blind people assisted if ballot papers are not in Braille? Secondly, what is the Commission doing in assisting, how is the Commission doing in assisting people with mental challenges in voting? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Tobel, Moloko Moloto from ENCA. I just want to know if all the voting stations yesterday managed to open for those who wanted to walk in, and in areas that are likely to be plagued by violence, what assurance are you giving to voters in those areas that they would be safe?
Okay. There's another question. I saw the third hand. Okay, maybe it's been covered. Let me, am I missing any other hands? We covered, no? Okay, there, sorry.
Francis Loramachate from Progressive Independent News Agency. What is it that the Commission is doing to make sure that the elections are not, some people don't think they are not free and fair, particularly looking at the incidents like such in Zanin where the IEC equipment, that material was found on the road. What is it that you're doing to make sure that the elections are not, some people don't feel that they are not free and fair?
Thank you. Okay, let me pause on that note. Let me allow my team to respond. CEO, Dr. Masuku. Vice Chairperson is coming through. Commissioner Love.
So with regard to the issue of people who use Braille, and we do know that not all people who are blind prefer to use Braille, but for anybody who uses Braille, every voting station has been equipped with what we call the Universal Ballot template, which is a cardboard facility that has Braille on it, and we have 10 of them, one for the national ballot paper, and then 9 for each of the different provinces. Those were, as I say, all voting stations have been trained and equipped to use those, and anybody asking for that assistance had a right to receive it. We haven't heard specific concerns and complaints in that regard, and we hope that none arise. With regard to people who may require assistance because they are dealing with mental challenges, to the extent that people are requesting that assistance, either in the form of support for them, maybe if they are in some way autistic or in any other kind of sense requiring special visits, those home visits, those are part of the special voting requests, and we hope we've been able to accommodate anybody in that regard. Similarly, at a voting station, anybody who requests assistance will receive assistance at the voting station. With regard to the issue of the mitigating perceptions and concerns about compromising the freeness and fairness of our elections. As we all know, this is a collective endeavor. The Commission has put in place a number of measures to deal with this, but as our CEO mentioned to you earlier, we really count on citizens and we count on party agents and we count on observers to assist us. And where there is an identification of a particular issue, a particular problem, we ask you to report it at that particular voting station, but if needs be, to escalate it with as much detail as possible. We also call upon all South African citizens not only to vote. Whenever you registered, you must know that your registration stands, and we ask you to go and vote in your numbers. But in addition to that, we ask all South Africans to respect those who choose to go and vote, because that is their exercise of freedom of speech, and that's part of you helping us to make this an electoral process a free one. And to all the political parties, most of them are very, very well schooled in the issues that pertain to tomorrow, to enabling people to go and vote. And again, we ask you to call on your supporters, to call on your membership to ensure that our electoral code of conduct is well upheld. I will leave the CEO to cover the issues, because he did mention some areas where there were problems, to actually give you the quantity of voting stations that face difficulties at different times in terms of opening.
Thank you very much. In fact, very few voting stations did not open yesterday. It's two in the Bushbuckridge area, one in Reicher Park in Ekurhuleni, Gauteng. The 47 that had not opened in the Eastern Cape, after the intervention of the South African Police Services, we were able to open them and they were all functional, as was the case with those voting stations that did not open on time in KwaZulu-Natal. In Khanyesa, in the northwest, two voting stations there did not open, and that's where we had problems with the motor vehicle of one of our conflict panelists being banned, as well as the area manager's car being stoned and so on. So that is the total sum of voting stations that were operational. Hence our view that we made a very good start yesterday, and that momentum has been carried into today. We are functional where we need to be functional today, because the reality is that if all special votes have been cast, that voting station will stop operating. There's no business to transact beyond the last person voting who's on the list. I think we've laid, again, a good basis for tomorrow. The 2 days has given us the test that we needed to our processes. We'll fine-tune them as we should, and tomorrow at 7 o'clock, all voting stations should be operational. And we should have the conduct of election in an orderly fashion at all voting stations tomorrow, and we are confident about that.
I don't see any other hands. Looks like questions of clarity have been taken care of. Going once, twice, thrice. Looks like we're good. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, just to confirm that tomorrow has been declared the IEC Day in South Africa, when South Africans from every part of this country will be voting. So tomorrow when we wake up, we hashtag IEC South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, the leadership of the IEC, thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ma. Commissioner Masuke. Danke.